The top stories tonight in Y News. President Rodrigo Duterte expected to announce new community quarantine status tonight.
A group of Filipino experts reiterate that no one must be complacent despite the decrease in the reproduction rate of COVID-19 in the country. Experts say the downtrend must be maintained for several months before loosening restrictions, especially in Metro Manila. Meanwhile, Navotas City reports a downward trend in its daily COVID-19 cases. But the city mayor says there is still no room for complacency.
A meat processors group warns of possible price increase of several canned goods, while also urging the government to lift the import ban on poultry products from Brazil.
The Department of Health warns to transact only with licensed laboratories, while home service of COVID-19 tested is permitted as long as a licensed laboratory conducts the testing. Cases in the United States of America approach 6 million, nearly a quarter of the world's total case count.
Breast milk unlikely source of COVID-19 infection for babies, a study suggests. Good evening, Philippines and the world. Today is Monday, August 31, 2020. I am Jorlene Delgado. Join us in the next hour as we deliver today's top stories around the country and in other parts of the world.
We are also seen in 1,935 satellite monitoring centers nationwide and via live streaming worldwide through the UNTV News and Rescue social media accounts and our website, untv.com. I am William Theo.
First in the news, the Interagency Task Force against COVID-19 will mull over suggestions on the community quarantine statuses of provinces and regions, as President Rodrigo Duterte is expected to announce what comes after today. Joan Nano tells us why.
The Metro Manila mayors recommend extending the general community quarantine in the National Capital Region starting tomorrow, September 1. In an interview, Metro Manila Council Chairman and Parañaque City Mayor Edwin Olivares said that their decision was unanimous to place Metro Manila in another round of GCQ. The Metro Manila mayors vow to strengthen the medical care capacity of hospitals, establish more quarantine facilities, and intensify localized lockdowns. However, the MMC wants to shorten the curfew hours in Metro Manila. From the current 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., they are proposing to adjust the curfew hours to 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. Meanwhile, the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases is mulling over adjusting the community quarantines to 30 days.
Definitely, we're looking into longer-term period ng community quarantine. In other words, baka hindi na 14 days, baka 1 month.
Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez explains that this aims to let businesses and other sectors recover from the effects of the pandemic.
Ang pinaka-benefit po nito, of course, mas may stability sa ating pagkilos, sa pag-prepare rin ng reopening of the economy. Hindi magbabago-bago in 14 or 15 days, may konting stability. And again, kasi kung nag-move na tayo towards yung more community, granular lockdown. So talagang mas yun ang parang kailangan ma-perfect natin.
As of now, only 75% of the economy has reopened, according to the Department of Trade and Industry. The national government has yet to declare when the different sectors contributing to the economy can operate fully, as there is still no vaccine against COVID-19. Joan Nano, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the president is also expected to announce the next chief of the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation or PhilHealth following the resignation of Ricardo Morales. According to Senator Bongo, the president's former top aide, tonight the president will make his announcement during his public address after his meeting with the Interagency Task Force against COVID-19. It was President Duterte who asked Morales to resign and accepted the resignation last week because of the former PhilHealth's chief medical condition.
Meanwhile, a group of Filipino experts reiterate that no one must be complacent despite the decrease in the reproduction rate of COVID-19 in the country. Experts say the downtrend must be maintained for several months before loosening restrictions, especially in Metro Manila. Vincent Arboleda will tell us why.
There is still a possibility the R0 or the reproduction rate of COVID-19 in the country would increase, according to experts from the University of the Philippines Octa Research. According to Professor Guido David of the UP Octa Research team, with their hospitals 70% occupied, it will be hard to manage if authorities suddenly loosen the restrictions and COVID-19 cases increase again. According to UP Octa Research, they have obtained a downtrend on the R0 or the reproduction rate of COVID-19. David says, from an R0 of 1.5 during the end of July, the current R0 is down to 1.01 at the end of August.
Pag reproduction number, pag less than 1, it's flattening. And right now sa Metro Manila, it's 1.01 yung weekly average ng reproduction number. So it's very close.
David says the decrease in reproduction rate means that the transmission of the virus is somehow being addressed. Experts say that the 2-week modified enhanced community quarantine in Metro Manila, Laguna, Cavite, Rizal, and Bulacan last August 4 to 18 helped to control the spread.
Kaya nga kung ma-flat natin yung curve sa Metro Manila ngayon, hindi ibig sabihin tapos na yung pandemic. This will still have to be sustained for mga 3 months, maybe even longer. Pero kailangan sustain siya. That's the important thing.
But Professor David adds that further observation is needed before the government decides to fully open the country's economy, especially Metro Manila. Professor David further adds that should the downtrend of COVID-19 cases continue, it may be possible to implement a much relaxed quarantine restriction by December. Vincent Arboleda, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The Navotas city government records a drop in the number of new COVID-19 cases. Despite the flattening of the curve, the local government unit continues to implement stringent testing, contact tracing, and isolation to residents and workers. Asher Kadapan Jr. tells us why.
The local government of Navotas City has recorded a total of more than 4,000 cases of COVID-19, but 3,678 have recovered from the disease, while 494 active cases are remaining. 123 have died. In the past couple of weeks, from about 24 new cases being reported each day, the number now averages at about 15. But according to Navotas City Mayor Toby Tiangco, there is no room for complacency even while the number goes down.
Mahaba pa to eh. Hindi naman porket bumaba na yan, dapat maging confident tayo. Of course, dapat matuwa tayo. Pero dapat, ang mas importante is pagsikapan pa natin na lalong makababa.
The city chief executive also reveals that stringent COVID-19 testing, contact tracing within 24 hours, and isolation are the keys in slowing down the contagion. The LGU does not only test its own residents, but also those who are from other places but work in Navotas. The city government also prioritizes non-medical frontliners, including drivers of public utility jeepneys and tricycles, market vendors, and grocery personnel.
Pag ang isang tao ay naging positive, ay i-contact trace natin siya within 24 hours. Ang ibig sabihin, dapat natin malaman within 24 hours kung sino yung direktang nakasalamuha niya. After siya ma-contact trace, ay dadali na siya sa isolation facility. No? Hindi po kami pumapayag ng home quarantine dahil karamihan nga ng hawaan ay nasa loob ng bahay.
The LGU also supports the family of the household's breadwinner who has contracted the disease by providing food and relief goods. Mayor Chanco also appeals to the public to stay at home as much as possible, otherwise wear masks and face shields, observe regular hand washing and social distancing. Asher Kadapan Jr., UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
Cavite's 6th District Representative Luis Ferrer IV has tested positive for COVID-19. The congressman calls on everyone who had come in close contact with him to immediately coordinate with the General Trias City Health Office for assessment of their health condition. Congressman Ferrer says he had experienced flu-like symptoms, so he had to isolate himself and undergo a swab test. On Saturday night, his test result came back positive. The district office has been closed. The city health office has begun tracing close contacts of the lawmaker. Meanwhile, the country's Department of Health says that 3,446 new cases were reported today, based on tests done by 97 out of 110 laboratories. The National Capital Region reported the most new cases with 1,900, followed by Laguna, Cavite, Leyte, and Pampanga. Each of these provinces reported more than 100 new confirmed cases. Now, the cumulative cases of coronavirus infection in the Philippines surpassed 220,000. The total active cases in the country are almost 60,000, 91.3% of which are in mild condition. We have lost 38 more patients, raising the death toll to over 3,500. But through our fervent prayers, medical interventions, and sacrifices of our medical frontliners, 165 more people have won their battle against the invisible enemy. That brings the total recoveries nationwide to 157,562. Thanks be to God.
Let's now take a closer look at the updated count of coronavirus cases around the world. The COVID-19 pandemic has now reached a total of over 25.2 million confirmed cases in 188 countries, regions, and sovereignty, with more than 265,000 new cases were reported in various countries. The fast-spreading disease has claimed almost 847,000 lives. That's after more than 5,000 new deaths were recorded worldwide in the last 24 hours, while more than 16.6 million patients across the globe have recovered from the new coronavirus infection. Thanks be to God. The Department of Health, or DOH, allows remote or home service COVID-19 testing as long as a licensed testing laboratory conducts the specimen collection. Our health correspondent, Aiko Miguel, tells us why.
A swab sample or specimen of COVID-19 suspect or probable cases isolated in their homes can be collected remotely or home service. The health department allows this as long as healthcare workers who are collecting such samples abide by the health protocols. These include the wearing of complete personal protective equipment. DOH Department Circular Number 2020-0204, or the Advisory on Specimen or Swab Collection of Licensed Testing Laboratories, also states that the health worker must be working with a licensed testing laboratory. The DOH adds private companies are allowed to hold a remote or home service COVID-19 testing of their employees as long as they abide by the DOH protocols. The protocols are also stated in Department Memorandum Order Number 2020-0324, or the mandatory notification of remote collection activity of COVID-19 testing laboratories.
Ang pinapayagan lang natin gumawa nito ay licensed laboratories ng DOH. So among these licensed laboratories, if they intend to have this remote collection, like yung sinasabi mo, pupunta sila sa bahay, parang home service, with the proper PPEs at saka kailangan sundin pa rin yung mga guidelines on proper specimen collection, pinapayagan natin yan, ino-notify nila ang DOH if they have this kind of service so that we can monitor.
It is also stated in the Department Memorandum Order that COVID-19 testing laboratories shall notify DOH Health Facilities and Services Regulatory Bureau 3 days prior the proposed schedule of the remote collection activity. Now, the DOH cautions the public to transact only with licensed testing laboratories in the country. Currently, there are 110 licensed testing laboratories in the country, which can be seen at the Health Department's website.
Pero may mga lumalabas kasi ngayon na mga parang hindi naman mga licensed na labs, tapos nag-o-offer din sila ng home service. So, yan po ay ating strictly na minomonitor at masasanction po yung mga yan kung sakaling we will find that they are not licensed laboratories but they are offering this remote collection of specimens for SARS-CoV-2 virus. That is allowed. We have Department Circular 2020-0204 only for licensed laboratories.
The DOH reminds private companies must shoulder the testing of employees and not subtract the expenses from the employee's wage. Workers who are required to report to work physically are prioritized to be tested in accordance with the existing community quarantine guidelines implemented by the government. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
The Department of Health is calling on the public to respect the privacy of COVID-19 patients. According to the DOH, penalties await individuals who will be proven to violate the privacy of patients. Aiko Miguel is back to tell us why.
Posting names of COVID-19 patients on social media is a clear violation of Republic Act 10173 or the Data Privacy Act of 2012 according to the DOH. Anyone violating this law and proven to be posting confidential information of COVID-19 patients online shall be penalized. A fine of 500,000 pesos to 2 million pesos or imprisonment ranging from 1 year to 3 years await violators.
Dun sa RA on notifiable diseases, we can share information to officials so that they can provide proper interventions para dito sa mga may sakit. Pero hindi po allowed sa batas and even in the data privacy law na pinopost po natin yung listahan ng mga pangalan sa social media because we are violating yung karapatan ng isang tao to confidentiality and yung kanyang privacy, no?
The DOH is also asking for the cooperation of local governments to help them protect the identity of COVID-19 patients, their close contacts, and even their families. This is to avoid discrimination, distress, physical, and emotional harm to COVID-19 patients.
I like to call on the general public and also our officials na sana mas maging considerate tayo dun sa estado ngayon ng ating mga pasyente with COVID. Let us remove this practice of stigmatizing and discriminating our patients. Kailangan nila ng suporta natin sa ngayon. Sila naman ay kapag na-isolate na at nakatapos ay sila na ay hindi na nakakapanghawa rin.
Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Lawmakers in the lower chamber of Congress in the Philippines will be busy beginning next week hearing the proposed budgets of various departments. The education sector gets the highest allocation in the proposed 2021 national budget. Ray Pelayo tells us why.
The country's economic status will be initially scrutinized by the House of Representatives on Friday when lawmakers begin the hearing on the proposed 2021 national budget. Members of the Development Budget Coordination Committee, including Budget Secretary Wendell Avisado, Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez, Acting Economic Planning Secretary Carl Chua, and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Benjamin Jokno, are invited. House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano said they target the proposed budget for the enactment before the end of November this year, which might be record-breaking. On September 7, the lawmakers will hear the proposed budgets of the Department of Agrarian Reform and Energy, the Energy Regulatory Commission, the Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office, and the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation. The next day, the budgets of the Departments of National Defense, Environment and Natural Resources, Foreign Affairs, and Social Welfare and Development will be heard. On September 9 would be the budgets of the Science and Technology, Trade and Industry, and Labor Departments, the Commission on Higher Education, and of the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority or TESDA. On September 10, the lawmakers in the lower chamber will scrutinize the proposed budgets of three departments, namely the Interior, Tourism, and Agriculture departments. The budgets of the Presidential Communications Operations Office, the Department of Information and Communication Technology, and the Department of Public Works and Highways will be heard the following day, September 11. On September 14 will be the proposed budgets of the Departments of Justice, Human Settlements, and Urban Development and Health. The next schedule will be on September 15. That will be for the budgets of the Office of the President, the Office of the Vice President, and the Transportation and Education Departments. The Duterte administration proposes 4.506 trillion pesos for the 2021 national budget. The top departments with the highest allocations are Education, Public Works, the Interior and Local Government, National Defense, Health, Social Welfare, Transportation, Agriculture, Judiciary, and Labor. The hearings will be streamed live through the House of Representatives' social media accounts. Ray Pilayo, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
Meanwhile, the Department of Education has increased its proposed budget for 2021. The biggest amount will be allocated for the increase of teacher salary, benefits, and the alternative learning system. Dante Amento will join us tonight to tell us why live. Yes, Dante?
The Department of Education is expected to defend beginning this week its proposed budget or its national expenditure program for 2021 amounting to 605.74 billion pesos. This is 53 billion pesos or 9.54% higher than this year's 552.99 billion pesos in the General Appropriations Act. The largest allocation of 475 billion pesos will go to the teachers' allowances, benefits, and salaries, which are expected to increase next year through the Salary Standardization Program and other educators' benefits. Here's what Undersecretary Annalyn Sevilla said about the budget increase.
Ay merong budget increase or may salary increase ang mga guro. So habang nagke-create ka ng mga position, tumataas din yung kanilang mga salaries, allowances, benefits. At meron pong nakalagay dyan na pera.
8.996 billion pesos will be allocated for DepEd's Education Computerization Program and 15.216 billion pesos for the flexible learning through the distance learning approach, such as the preparation of printed modules. Education Secretary Leonor Briones says they are not expecting that majority of the parents choose the modular learning system amid the pandemic. For now, a total of 57% of modules are ready for distribution across the country.
Sa enrollment, tinanong yung parents at yung mga bata kung anong preference nila. Kasi sabi namin, we will adjust to the preference where everyone is comfortable with. Ay lumabas ay modular. I was a bit surprised, especially in NCR.
That its 2021 proposed budget will be approved because they need enough budget due to the unexpected changes in the education sector. As what our colleague Ray Pilayo reported, based on the national budget proposal submitted by the Department of Budget and Management or DBM to the House of Representatives, the education sector remains the top priority with a 754 billion peso budget. Harley.
Dante, in your report, you said that next year there will be an increase in the salary of teachers. But how about the hiring of new teachers? Will DepEd continue hiring despite this ongoing pandemic?
Yes, Harleen, during DepEd press briefing earlier, Undersecretary for Finance Annalyn Sevilla said it is in their plan to hire 10,000 additional teachers next year. In fact, DepEd's 2021 proposed budget includes the salary for the new teachers, and the hiring of educators is part of their 2021 expected outputs. Arlene.
Thank you so much, Dante Amento, for that report.
Meanwhile, a facility that houses computers, printer, and internet access opens in Narangay 585, Manila City today. Dubbed as Escuela Hub, it aims to provide free use of its equipment to students, teachers, and parents who are incapable of buying them. According to Manila City Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso, the facility will promote quality and accessible education as blended learning system is implemented and face-to-face classes remain prohibited. Mayor Dumagoso hopes that other places will establish the same facility that was built in partnership with local officials and private sectors. A group of meat processors in the country call on the government to lift the import ban on poultry products from Brazil. Joanano tells us why.
It has been 2 weeks since the government an import ban on poultry products from Brazil. This was after a report from Chinese authorities claiming that chicken coming from Brazil were found to be infected with SARS-CoV-2. The import ban covers mechanically deboned meat, which is used as raw material in manufacturing several canned products. The Philippine Association of Meat Processors Incorporated fear of a possible shortage in mechanically deboned meat in the next days, which might result in a 10 to 15% price increase in canned meat products.
We still had 30 to 45 days of inventory. Kaya lang, kalagpas na yung mahigit 2 linggo, our inventory is now down to only 15 to 30 days. Nakakatakot. That's why I say very precarious. That's why when the ban was implemented, we were really begging that this temporary ban be addressed very quickly. Otherwise, mapuputol yung sinulid na nagbabind ng aming operating systems.
Brazil is one of the major suppliers of imported meat products in the Philippines. PAMPI worries where to source its supply as meat processors in Brazil advise that they will give the supply of meat to South Africa if the import ban will not be lifted. The Bureau of Animal Industry, for its part, says it is taking note of PAMPI's request. The Bureau also reveals that the Philippine government has submitted a letter to Brazil to request some documents related to the management of COVID-stricken meat processing plants in the South American country. The Department of Trade and Industry supports the call of PAMPI on the Department of Agriculture to lift the ban on poultry products coming from Brazil.
Yung basihan daw po ng pag-ban ng importation ng mga chicken and chicken products mula Brazil ay wala hong scientific basis na ito po ay may dalang COVID at makakahawa. Kaya ho kami may sulat ho kay Secretary Dar para ho sana i-lift na uli yung ban na yon dahil kung hindi ay matetreten po ang ating food supply lalo na yung galing dito sa mga meat processors.
Joanano, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
A lawmaker is urging the government to drop its project agreements with Chinese companies that are allegedly involved in the construction of artificial islands and military installations in the West Philippine Sea. Senator Risa Hontiveros made this call amid reports of China launching of missiles in the disputed waters in the South China Sea, and after the United States blacklisted 24 Chinese firms, citing its supposed role in helping the Chinese military to construct and militarize the South China Sea. Earlier, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin Jr. also said in an interview that he will strongly recommend to terminate contracts with Chinese firms that were proven involved in West Philippine Sea reclamation. For Hontiveros, it is disturbing that the government has engaged with Chinese companies involved in the destruction of countries' territories. According to the senator, the subsidiaries of China Communications Construction Company Limited has a memorandum of understanding with the government for infrastructure projects in Manila, Davao, Cebu, and Clark, Pampanga. These include the Davao Coastline and Port Development Project, Manila Harbor Center Reclamation Project, Cebu International and bulk terminal project and the Manila-Clark Railway project. She adds that another Chinese company, China Harbor Engineering Company, won the bid for the construction of an access road to New Clark City. For Hontiveros, these Chinese deals must be stopped, saying that it may be equivalent to giving up the country's territories if the government continues with the projects. Meanwhile, Akbayan Group has called on the government to disclose and audit all loan agreements it entered with the Chinese government. Akbayan Chair Emeritus and former Commission on Human Rights Chair Eta Rosales has challenged President Rodrigo Duterte to provide the public the loan contracts and other documents of all Chinese loans that his administration has acquired. According to Rosales, there must be a comprehensive debt audit of all Chinese loan agreements to determine if these are legitimate and necessary to fully protect the country's national interest. She adds, all debts that would require the country's sovereignty, territory, security, and economy as payment must never be recognized. William, we're on board the UNTV radio mobile booth and we are here in EDSA Quezon Avenue in Quezon City. Let's take a look at the situation on the road. For motorists coming from Cubao going to North Avenue, expect a light traffic ahead along the northbound lane just before the EDSA Quezon Avenue intersection. Meanwhile, no major delays as well on the other side of the road along the EDSA southbound lane in this section of EDSA Quezon Avenue for motorists coming from North Avenue going to Ortigas. Now, here's a glimpse of what's the weather like in parts of the country. Typhoon Julian has accelerated, moving north-northwestward. State Weather Bureau Pagasa says as of 3 p.m. today, the eye of Julian was located at 700 kilometers northeast of Basco, Batanes, with maximum sustained winds of 155 kilometers per hour near the center and gustiness of up to 190 kilometers per hour. It will remain far from the country's landmass and is forecast to exit the Philippine area of responsibility tonight or tomorrow early morning. Pag-asa adds Julian may reach its peak intensity between tonight and tomorrow morning. Julian, or the southwest monsoon, will bring cloudy skies with scattered rain showers and thunderstorms over Ilocos region, Zambales, and Bataan. Meanwhile, partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers will be felt over Metro Manila and the rest of the country, still due to the southwest monsoon or localized thunderstorms. Possible flash floods or landslides may occur during severe thunderstorms, though tropical cyclone advisory is issued. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian says the violations committed by Meralco may be brought up against the company's congressional franchise. This comes after the Energy Regulatory Commission, or ERC, imposed a 19 million peso fine against the country's largest power distributor due to its failure to comply with the commission's directive and the bill shocks it caused to its customers during the enhanced community quarantine period. In a radio interview, the senator, who also chairs the Senate Committee on Energy, warns the country's largest power distributor that its violations may be used against them and that they may also face the same fate of broadcast network ABS-CBN, which suffered a rejection in its franchise bid. Senator Gatchalian adds he is in favor of conducting periodic reviews of franchises of distribution utilities. The lawmaker says public utilities should ensure the proper delivery of services, especially now that the country is facing a pandemic. The Philippine Army drops its recommendation to reimpose martial law in Sulu. Leia Ilagan details why.
Philippine Army Chief Lieutenant General Cirilito Subihana says he gives due respect to the wisdom of the national leadership and the sentiment of the general public. Lieutenant General Subihana adds the military has displayed utmost professionalism and maturity during the implementation of martial law in Sulu from 2017 to 2019, when he was the commander of Joint Task Force Sulu. The Philippine Army chief adds that time they were able to reduce the number of kidnapped victims from 54 to 3. A number of key Abu Sayyaf group leaders were killed, hundreds of their members surrendered, and thousands of loose firearms were handed over. Following the twin blast in Jolo, Subihana expressed his intention to recommend the re-imposition of martial law in Sulu. Now he has dropped his recommendation. Even the local governments in Sulu and the commander of Western Mindanao Command do not support the re-imposition of martial law in Sulu. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
President Rodrigo Duterte assures full support to the military in quelling terrorism in Mindanao following the recent twin blast in Jolo, Sulu. He also expressed regret that the threat of insurgency and extremism has hindered progress in Mindanao. Rosalie Cos tells us why.
Since his fifth State of the Nation address on July 27, 2020, President Rodrigo Duterte made his first public appearance in Jolo, Sulu yesterday. The chief executive visited the two sites of the August 24 explosions, which killed 15 people, including soldiers and civilians. He talked to the troops at the Kuta General Chodulfo Bautista headquarters in Jolo, Sulu. The chief executive gave his assurance of full support to the military in crushing terrorism in Mindanao.
Bilang isang Pilipino, ibibigay ko sa inyo ang lahat ng suporta na kailangan ninyo para matupad ang inyong misyon dito sa Jolo. I commit myself to work with you, my dear troops, to ensure that these terrorists will have no future in this country.
The president also recognized those who have sacrificed their lives to maintain security in the province. The country's chief executive also expressed regret over Mindanao's hampered progress.
For decades, Mindanao's progress has been hindered by the threat of insurgency and extremism. Kung wala lang ho sana itong the seed of hatred na nakalagay sa isip from generation to generation, sana ngayon maganda na ang buhay para sa lahat.
The chief executive appealed to the government forces to continue their fight against terrorism and to aim lasting peace for the country.
That if we cannot really agree, then we fight. And we fight hard hanggang magkaubusan na. Maybe by that time, kung ubos na ang lahat, wala ng gera.
Rosa Licoz, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people, we give glory to God.
President Rodrigo Duterte joins the entire nation in celebrating the National Heroes Day. In his message for the regular national holiday, he honors not only the Filipinos who fought for the country's freedom, but also the heroism of Filipinos sacrificing their lives amid the health crisis in the Philippines. Through their bravery, the chief executive also hopes this will inspire every Filipino to become everyday heroes.
Present-day challenges posed by the current public health crisis has given rise to modern-day heroes. The countless Filipino frontliners here and abroad who are battling the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope that the bravery of our Filipino heroes, past and present, would inspire us all to face and overcome even the most unfavorable situations. Together, Let us become everyday heroes as we pursue a better future for everyone.
Here's Elsie Marcos reporting live from Auckland, New Zealand.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern confirmed yesterday that Auckland will leave lockdown and move into what she calls a level 2.5 starting Monday. Ardern thanked Aucklanders who came out of a 2.5-week lockdown at 11:59 last night, but also urged them to keep going and do their part to keep COVID-19 contained. She said that New Zealand will move back up alert levels if necessary. Level 2.5 means social gatherings will be limited to 10 people. The only exception is for Auckland funerals and tangihanga, which can have up to 50 people. From today, masks need to be worn on all forms of public transport by people older than 12. Ardern encourages Aucklanders to follow those rules. The 2-meter social distancing rule on the street and in stores such as the supermarket applies. All workplaces, including those with face-to-face interaction, are open. All early childhood centers, schools, polytech, and universities are open. Ardern also said she was incredibly angry about botched testing communications. Despite officials' advice issued on the government's COVID-19 Facebook page last night, she said everyone in South and West Auckland did not need to get a test. Meanwhile, police have been quietly setting up a 9 million facial recognition system that can take a live feed from CCTV cameras and identify people from it. This would push New Zealand into new territory for tracking citizens. It will be run by a non-police contractor, US firm DataWorks Plus, and collect 15,000 facial images a year, with that expected to expand up to tenfold. Both the department and the police are using some of the world's most powerful facial recognition software, NeoFace, developed by NEC, a Japanese company with 44 billion in revenue a year. Both said they did not tell the public as these are mere upgrades, and neither did a privacy impact assessment, though Internal Affairs told the Privacy Commissioner about NeoFace while the police did not. Let's now take a closer look at the updated count of coronavirus cases in countries worst hit by the pandemic. The cumulative cases in the United States of America near 6 million as of today, while the death toll in the US has reached the 183,000 mark. Apparently in this tally, Peru surpasses the total cases of South Africa and is now the 5th worst hit country today, with almost 640,000. The Americas continue to be the region with the most caseload, with more than 13 million or more than half of the total global case count, while both Europe and Southeast Asia contribute more than 4 million cases. Meanwhile, Australia's outbound travel plan held one of the strictest coronavirus public health measures in the world as it passes its 5-month mark. Joining us tonight is one of our correspondents from Australia, Marvi Delphine, to tell us why, live. Marvi?
Australia appears to be the only democracy in the world that has banned its citizens and residents from leaving the country as a public health measure during the coronavirus pandemic. This Commonwealth country has been compared to countries such as its neighbor New Zealand and also to the United Kingdom and the United States that have only advised their citizens and residents against traveling overseas. The enforcement of an international travel ban since March 25 this year, when Prime Minister Scott Morrison shut down Australia's borders to outbound travelers, has resulted in only about a third of requests by Australians to leave the country as successful. The difficulty of citizens and residents to get the green light for outbound travel comes from the set of strict exemption criteria that are needed to be met. To avoid facing rejection at the airports, Australians are required to apply online for a travel exemption from the Australian Border Force, or ABF. As of August 16, the ABF has received more than 104,780 travel exemption requests from Australian citizens and permanent residents. This statistics takes into account requests made by more than one person and also multiple requests from individual travelers. Of those, more than 34,370 people have been successful. This international travel ban, deemed uncontroversial by Prime Minister Scott Morrison, is expected to end on October 24, though it is likely to be extended as the federal government confirms taking a cautious approach in its fight against COVID-19. Finance Minister Matthias Cormann said that the government could not yet foresee the timetable by which international borders will be able to open. Elsie?
Marvy, you mentioned about criteria for being granted an exemption for outbound travel. Can you go over for us about some of these?
Elsie, the list for criteria can be found on the Border Force website. Currently, there are 6 reasons that would allow Australian citizens and permanent residents to seek permission to leave Australia. These are travel as part of the response to the COVID-19 outbreak, including provision of aid, travel that is essential for conducting critical industries and businesses, to receive urgent medical treatment not available in Australia, urgent and unavoidable personal business, compassionate or humanitarian grounds, and travel that is in the national interest. There are also travel exemptions for airline and maritime crew, New Zealanders with a special category subclass 444 visa, freight workers, and people traveling for government matters. Also, temporary visa holders are free to leave Australia at any time, but they're warned that if they decide to re-enter, it will be up to the Border Force Commissioner's call. Elsie?
Thank you very much, Marvy Delphine. The Australian government prepares for the bushfire season, while residents are also advised to take the necessary precautions. Joining us tonight is another correspondent from Australia, Early Briones, to tell us why, live. Early?
Australia is just 4 months away before the country hits its bushfire season. Experts at this stage are now calling for the Australians to brace themselves and be prepared for this year's bushfire season. While New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian fully supports the implementation of the recommendations from the New South Wales Inquiry Report, a clear funding commitment for fire response is yet to be seen. According to the inquiry report, some of the changes that need to be enforced would be upgrading of all trucks, equipment and systems, personal protective equipment, and better, safer trucks. The inquiry report also recommended to have an integrated dispatch system to ensure faster response to 000 calls. This is expected to be operational this coming fire season. The second recommendation was for a better management of heavy machinery, including installation of GPS trackers. While the third recommendation asked for the New South Wales and Victorian governments to finalize a multi-agency memorandum of understanding on resource sharing, which was meant to be in place in 2020 to 2021 fire season. However, the Rural Fire Service believes the plans are too ambitious and the time frame will still needed to work through. According to the Bushfire and Natural Hazards Research Centre, Australia had a more normal rain pattern from January to June 2020 that eased some deficiencies in the country. With the current COVID-19 situation, the pandemic poses new problems for the National Aerial Firefighting Centres, which coordinates hiring and deployment of firefighting aircrafts within the country. Elsie?
Earl, we know that we are still in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. And a few months from now, Australia will hit its fire season again. What are the government's economic recovery plans at this stage?
COVID-19 has caused the largest economic shock in Australia since 1930. The government is investing millions of dollars in developing approved vaccine, which is needed to control the virus so that borders, tourism and trade can slowly open up. The government also plans to reinforce the international education industry, which is worth $37.6 billion. More job creation activities are also being put in place, like giving free training for upscaling purposes. The Australian government also has been providing support to different businesses through a government subsidy called JobKeeper, which helps businesses in their cash flow and in order to preserve job. Elsie?
Thank you, Early, for that report. And those are the reasons behind the news here in New Zealand and in other parts of the globe. Back to you, William.
Thank you, Elsie Marcos, live from Auckland, New Zealand.
Breastfeeding mothers with COVID-19 do not need to worry about transmitting the virus to their babies through breast milk. Here's why from Jovic Bermas.
In a recent study published in the online edition of Journal of American Medical Association, researchers found only 1 out of 64 breast milk samples from 18 infected women across the United States tested positive for viral RNA of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2. However, through subsequent tests, they found that the virus was unable to replicate and therefore unlikely to cause COVID-19 infection in the breastfed infant. Dr. Christina Chambers, the study's co-principal investigator and professor of pediatrics at University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, said detection of viral RNA does not equate to infection. It has to grow and multiply in order to be infectious, and we did not find that in any of our samples. This study answers the critical question of whether COVID-19 can be potentially transmitted through breast milk. Dr. Chambers adds their findings suggest that breast milk itself is not likely a source of infection for the infant. To prevent transmission of COVID-19 while breastfeeding, experts still recommend hand hygiene and sterilizing pumping equipment after each use. Researchers hope these results, as well as future studies, will reassure mothers to continue breastfeeding as human milk provides invaluable benefits to both mom and baby. The World Health Organization has said that continued breastfeeding is advised to all mothers, COVID-19 positive or not, in this time of pandemic, balancing between the risks of transmitting the virus and the disadvantage of denying the baby with the benefits of breast milk.
The risk of transmission seems to be extremely low. We've not documented anywhere in the world any clear cases where the baby did get infected from COVID. It doesn't seem to be infective in breast milk. Very, very seldom has it been found in breast milk. And yet for the consequences of not breastfeeding, we have well-documented consequences. So if that baby is deprived of breastfeeding because the mother is trying to prevent a COVID transmission, she's likely to be putting her baby at risk of so many other kinds of serious outcomes.
WHO also strongly advises breastfeeding mothers with COVID-19 to observe the minimum health protocols.
We know that SARS-CoV virus is primarily transmitted through respiratory drops, and so the primary thing that the mothers need to be doing is wearing a mask to protect their babies and washing their hands frequently. So that same advice that we give in general to prevent transmission would apply to that breastfeeding mother.
Even Sari Satyogi, WHO manager of social media and media monitoring, who interviewed Grammar Strawn, said that she was safely able to breastfeed her baby when she was infected with SARS-CoV-2 back in March. Jovic Bermas, UNTV News and Rescue. We serve the people. We give glory to God.
A Japanese company announces the successful test drive of its flying car. SkyDrive Incorporated held the public demonstration on August 25, according to the company's news release. The car, named SDO-3, manned with a pilot, took off and circled the field for about 4 minutes at the Toyota test field. It was the first public demonstration for a flying car in Japanese history. And those are the reasons behind the news, August 31, 2020. I am Horlin Delgado.
Because we need to know, we will always ask why. I am William Theo. We serve the people. We give glory to God.